everyone, my name is Isabella Colucci. I'm the curatorial intern here at Polly Hill Arboretum, and today I'm going to be presenting on what an herbarium is. To provide an overview of my presentation, I'm going to be going over a brief history of the Arboretum and the herbarium itself, and then I'm going to be defining what an herbarium is and how a voucher is made. I'm going to be also describing what the purpose of vouchers is and how they are digitized, as well as how to search for digitized vouchers. And I'm also going to be going over why are very important and how they help us here at the Arboretum. So Polly Hill was an experimental horticulturist. She started planting seeds in her 50s in 1958 after inheriting the property from her parents. And in 1998, the Arboretum opened to the public due to the support from Dr. David H. Smith, who was our co-founder. To define what an Arboretum is, it's a living museum of trees. And this relates to our mission as it is to perpetuate the experimental tradition in horticulture established by Polly Hill by sharing knowledge of plants and scientific procedure through educational programs, research, plant conservation, and exploration. And so I hope today my presentation will emphasize how the herbarium supports our mission. So to go over some herbarium history, Rose Treat was an islander. She discovered her love for algae in her 50s. In 2001, she donated her algal collection of roughly 300 specimens to the Arboretum. And so because of her donation, the Arboretum was able to promote the founding of our herbarium because of her collections. And also this enabled us to be able to house our own collection vouchers in the future. And so her seaweed collection was also used as a reference for an exhibit at the Martha's Vineyard Museum. So what is an herbarium? To define what it is, the plural for herbarium is herbaria. And so it is a collection of pressed and dried plants that are identified, stored, and cataloged for scientific purposes. Each herbarium specimen, called a voucher, has accompanying ecological and habitat information that's recorded. And so these specimens, along with their data, document the physical occurrence and distribution of plants over time. So below, we can see some pictures of some larger scale herbarium. On the left, we have the US National Herbarium in Washington, DC. And then on the right, we have the herbarium at Kew Gardens in the UK. So to further define what an herbarium voucher is, it's typically a pressed and mounted plant sample with the collection data that's used as a reference. Essentially, a voucher vouches for and confirms the identity of what was collected. A certain kind of voucher is a type specimen, and this is the primary and permanent reference used to describe a new species, genus, or other taxon. Essentially, it is the first specimen that is given this name and is considered a true example of this species. So over here on the right, we can see the type specimen for pale jewelweed in Patience pallida. And so this was the first time that it was collected and also named. So how is a voucher made? So I'm going to be going over how we collect and process our herbarium vouchers here at the Arboretum. So some initial steps include planning locations and times for optimal collection results. Some things to consider are whether or not plants have leaves, flowers, or fruits present, as these can help with being able to identify what we're collecting. And then obtaining collection permits and agreements from landowners, town, and state and country officials is very important, and this might take some time, but once this has been done, we can get out into the field and start collecting. So before a voucher, a plant is collected and a voucher started, each specimen is first identified in the field. And so I'm going to be going over an example that I did this summer. So this is American Germander Tucarum canadense variety canadense. And so the data is recorded and it is assigned a unique collection number. So I collected this, and the collection number is PHA 24001. And then some additional information that is typically collected is who collected it. This can be multiple people if that is how it was collected, the collection date, where it was located, what kind of information. So habitat information there is. So this was collected at edge of a pond. The phenology refers to what kind of state the plant that you're collecting is in. So you can see that there's some open flowers, there's some senescent flowers, which means that some blooms have gone past. And then there's also unopened flowers. And so the associated species are what's growing around it. And the GPS coordinates can be useful, and as someone who might be interested in returning to this location can then see if the population has changed over time. And then after it's been identified, it is then collected and pressed between newspaper, blotting paper, and cardboard to absorb water in a field plant press, and then is placed in an herbarium dryer and temporarily stored in a cabinet outside of the herbarium for further processing. So this is what an herbarium specimen looks like post-dryer. So while it's being temporarily stored, the specimen is then glued onto herbarium mounting paper, which is acid-free, which helps with preserving the quality of the specimen in the future. And then it is labeled with all that information that was collected, which was recorded when it was collected, such as the collection number, taxonomic information, as well as the ecological habitat and locational data. And so at this stage, it'll get more of an official label. As part of herbarium management, we also practice integrated pest management to control for pests such as insects and fungi. So the vouchers are then frozen before being cataloged to prevent the ruining of a particular specimen or potentially the entire collection. We also monitor our collection for signs of pest damage. And so we use cigar beetle traps, which are pheromone based, which would attract adults of this particular species to the trap. And so it gives us an estimate count if there's any cigar beetles in the herbarium. So after it's been frozen, the voucher is then cataloged based on its phylogenetic placement to define what a phylogenetic tree is. It illustrates the patterns of shared ancestry between lineages leading back to a common ancestor. So here we can see that there's a common ancestor of green algal, and then this blue line here are the algae or seaweeds. And then once embryo protection evolved, then we evolved plants started to lineate. And so each of these different lines are different lineages, but liverworts and mosses and hornworts are more on the older side. And then as we move more towards the right, we have angiosperms, which are newer. And this is speaking in evolutionary terms. And so this is important because the herbarium is arranged in the same way as the phylogeny. So here, this cabinet on the left is where the older plants are. And then as you move more towards the right, that's where the newer plants are kept. And so vouchers are then stored within folders within airtight cabinets that are in a climate-controlled room away from light. And so you can see once you open a cabinet that there's a lot of different folders in here. And so these overhanging flaps represent the family. And then each individual folder represents a particular genus. And then within that folder, there'll be, it will be organized by species alphabetically. And so why are herbarium vouchers important? So to go back to our definition, an herbarium is a collection of pressed and dried plants that are identified, stored, and cataloged for scientific purposes. So I'm going to be going over some scientific purposes with some historical context. So our first one is Luca Giuhini. He is known for creating the first documented herbarium. He was a physician and professor in Italy during the Renaissance period. And so he used the herbarium as a teaching tool for his students so that they could learn their plants even during the winter. Our next example is Carlos Linnaeus. He's known for creating the binomial naming system. So this is how we have the genus, species, scientific names that we use today. And so he used herbarium vouchers to help with deciding how plants were related to one another. And so people are able to send him vouchers to so that he could see more samples so that he could make taxonomic decisions based on a lot of data. Oops. And then we have the Linnaean herbarium, contains over 14,000 specimens from Asia, Europe, and the Americas, collected during European exploration. And then Charles Darwin, he's known for the theory of evolution. He collected vouchers on his trips to the Galapagos and other voyages. And about 24% of all the Galapagos plants known today, he collected. And so his vouchers are able to then be used for comparison so that it can help with modern day conservation practices and efforts. And now we have Alice Eastwood. She's known for saving the California Academy of Sciences herbarium. Eastwood was a self-taught botanist and the second woman curator of the herbarium at the California Academy of Sciences. And so she reorganized the herbarium there to be able to be used better for research use and also to preserve vouchers. And so in 1906, Eastwood saved 1,500 type specimens. Going back to our definition, that is the vouchers that are the first recorded and named for that particular species. And so she saved them from an earthquake and fire in San Francisco. which damaged the rest of the herbarium. And so she worked to rebuild the collection. By her 80th birthday, the herbarium had 300,000 vouchers. And she also authored over 300 publications, 200 of these after the age of 50, much like Polly Hill and Rose Treat, who did a lot of their scientific endeavors later in life. So what are our scientific purposes for the Polly Hill Arboretum herbarium vouchers? So we have 3 different projects that we're interested in documenting the flora of Dukes County, our living collections, as well as expedition trips. And so for the flora of Dukes County, these are the plants that are known to occur presently or historically on Martha's Vineyard and the Elizabeth Islands. It's a botanical survey. We're not the first ones to do a botanical survey of Dukes County, but we are working to update it. And so to define what a flora is, it is a list of plants for a particular region, habitat, or geological period. And so these are examples of the flora of New England or the flora of North America. So there's a variety of scale here for what a flora can be. And then for organizational purposes, we keep our flora of Dukes County specimens in green folders. For our living collections, we have this helps us with verifying and documenting important living collections here on the grounds. And so we have a nationally accredited Stewardia collection. And so these vouchers are housed in blue folders. And so this relates to honoring our Polly Hill's legacy and also helps with research, as you'll see later on. So for our expedition trips, this helps us document the plants that we encounter when we're doing collecting of wild seed, both locally, nationally, and globally. And so, and this relates to our mission for conservation and experimentation. And so these types of vouchers are kept in brown folders. For some quick herbarium statistics, for the flora of Dukes County, there's 133 families, 471 genera, and 819 species of these plants. There's 63% that are native, 37% that are non-native, and then 3% have a threatened status, and 5% with a watch list status. And so this is the flora based on data from 2022. And so for our living collections, there's 311 vouchers. And for our seed collection trips, there are 465 vouchers. So our vouchers are also digitized, which means that they are assigned a barcode. And this is what our digitization setup looks like. And then they are then uploaded to the Consortium of Northeastern Herbaria portal, which is shortened to CNH. And so to find what a consortium is, it's a group with a unified mission. And so they serve as a digital reference for researchers and botanists for this particular region of the Northeast. And so digitization can help with the preserving specimens, as it can be easily accessed without having to go anywhere. They used to be shipped before digitization. So think back to Carl Linnaeus, people would send him things. And if you think about plants like in a dried state, they're very fragile. So having a digitized version can help with preserving the specimens in the long term. So the Consortium of Northeast Herbaria, so far we've talked about historic vouchers and how they were used for study. We've also talked about the physical collection of vouchers and how we study them. And so now we're transitioning to the ability to reference these online and how Herbaria today keeps vouchers modern and relevant. So portals allow us to access vouchers that are stored away in cabinets and can be accessed by anyone since they are online. And so you can do a text-based search or a map-guided search within the CNH portal. And there's multiple different functionalities that this portal offers, but these are the ones that I'm going to be focusing on today. And I also wanted to show you a map of the flora of Dukes County that have been uploaded into the CNH portal. So for text-based search, this is, you can search for all the herbaria within the consortium, or you can deselect them, and then you can search for a specific herbarium. So I'm going to be going over how you can find one for Polly Hill. And so going back to our Sucrum canadense variety canadense, if you put that in and then you hit list display, this is what will pop up. And so these are all the occurrence records for the different vouchers that have been uploaded so far into the portal. And so if you click on the full record details, you will see all the information and data that was collected for this particular voucher. And so if we zoom in, this is the barcode that was assigned to it when it was digitized. And then we have the taxon information as well as the family. So this Tuberum canadense variety canadense is in the Lamiaceae family, which is the mint family. And then it was collected by Tim Bullen and Aaron Hepner. And then this is the date that it was recorded. And then for the locality, this particular voucher was collected on Cape Hoche Wildlife Refuge, which is a Trustees of Reservations property on Chappaquiddick Island. And so you'll see that there's also the coordinates where it was the habitat was a shoreline, and the notes say that it's native, so this means that it's native to Dukes County. And I wanted to stress that it was collected with scientific permits and permission from landowners. So if we go back to the main landing page for our occurrence record, you can then click on specimen images and it'll show you what the voucher actually looks like as we've taken an image of it, and this is what it looks like when it's been digitized. For a map guided search, this is going to be more generalized, so this will pull up all the occurrences that have coordinates associated with them. And so if we put in the same scientific name and then we look at the map here, you can see all of the different occurrences for all the herbaria across the consortium. And then if we zoom into the Dukes County, you'll see the different collections here that have been made. And the example that I was going over with how to collect a voucher, that location will be here once it's been uploaded into the portal. And then the previous example for the text-based search is here's the location where it is on Chappaquiddick Island. So some other types of vouchers that I think are interesting to compare to what I've shown you so far is that we have this moss voucher. And so mosses are actually kept in packets versus being glued because it makes it easier for them to be studied. And so there's other consortiums also that go along with different lineages. So we have the consortium of bryophyte herbaria. So this focuses on mosses, liverworts, and hornworts. And then another type of voucher that's a little bit different is that this is bulkier and has cones. So there's different things to think about for different plant traits. And so these are a little bit more trickier to mount. And then we have non-plant examples. So we have the algal voucher from Rose Treat that I showed earlier. And then also fungi are often collected in herbarium. So this is a voucher from the Morton Arboretum that's kept in a box. So why are herbaria important? Herbaria help us to observe and study plant taxonomy, evolution, and diversity. They also document rare, unusual, or even invasive plants. They also serve as a material, reference material for botanical illustrators, other herbaria, and researchers. And so they can help us document the impacts of environmental factors on plant populations. And so therefore we can understand biodiversity and its threats. So an herbarium represents both the past, present, and future of a plant population or species. So herbaria can help us with study and understand biodiversity by providing proof of existing biodiversity while also demonstrating changes in the landscape. So herbaria can record changes in geographic distribution and habitat information, or habitat fragmentations, I should say, as plant populations are documented through occurrence data. They also document introduced species of plants and can record record the climate change effects on plant populations as plants might flower earlier. And so this might be, depending on when collections were collected, then you can be able to track those changes over time. And then some cultural impacts. Herbaria can help train the next generation of botanists as they are a record of being able to track plant taxonomy. And so that can help with combating plant blindness as they're training botanists to recognize the importance of plants and being able to identify them. And then that can address the lack of funding for biodiversity and conservation efforts as they document and record relevant information about plant ecology. So plant populations are always changing over time, and so the threats to biodiversity contribute to this. And a way to understand this is to have conservation statuses. So the Massachusetts state has a natural heritage and endangered species program, and they have different ranks, and these are all based on abundance. Abundance is the observed and estimated frequency in which the species occurs within the state. And so their different ranks are endangered, which means that it's at risk of extinction. Threatened means that it's likely to become endangered. Special concerns means that it suffered decline and could threaten the species. And then you also have watch listed, which are a non-regulated, unofficial list of plants that are known or suspected to have conservation concern. And so an example I'd like to go over is from burning buffalo clover. So from 1940 to 1983, it was believed that it was extinct until 2 populations were discovered in West Virginia. This species relies on disturbance that was once provided by wild buffalo. And so when this species populations were rediscovered, it led to being able to better understand how it grows in the environment, and this has led to successful conservation efforts leading to populations being able to resurge. And so it was previously listed as a federally endangered species, but it officially got delisted in September 2021. And so as part of that process, populations are then monitored for 5 years to make sure that the populations are successful. So how does this relate to what we do here at the Arboretum? So an example of how herbaria help us is that for the floor of Dukes County, we have research associates Greg and Margaret who use herbaria data to find present populations of historic species. And so an example is the cleft-leaf hawthorn, which is endemic to Martha's Vineyard. And so Greg and Margaret were able to use historic herbaria data to find present populations, and they found records that indicated that there's populations near Sinningatacket Pond, and this is actually where Greg and Margaret found a few populations. And so this discovery has led to many conservation efforts that conserve this Massachusetts endangered species, which it was actually listed this year in 2024. And so this Vineyard Gazette article goes over some of those conservation efforts. And so Greg and Margaret have discovered there's about 30 trees on the island. For our living collections, this helps document what is in the collection. And so for example, there's the Stewardia collection, which is nationally accredited through the Plant Collections Network, and it was awarded in 2005. And this particular accreditation is a collaboration between the American Public Garden Association and the USDA Agricultural Research Service that is focused on conservation and care of a specific collection of plants. And so the accreditation process includes an in-depth review of all aspects of the collection, including curatorial practices, and also might include having representative herbarium vouchers. And so this distinction makes PHA a resource for anyone interested in conducting research on this genus, which supports our mission. For expedition trips, Herbaria can help us pre-plan where to find target taxa location. And as I've mentioned before, this is related to our mission to conserve and experiment as Polly Hill established. And so an example of this is from a recent trip to Oregon and California in 2022. And so we were interested in collecting Baker cypress, which is red listed as vulnerable by the International Union of Conservation of Nature due to fragmented populations. And it's actually not state listed in Oregon or California, but it is still conservation concerned. And so these are some resources that we use to be able to find different locations that we could look for while we were in this area. And so this is an example of the consortium of specific Northwest herbaria, and you'll notice that it looks pretty similar to the Northeast consortium's website. And so you'll see that there's occurrence data and then also a mapped version, so that this particular location was able for us to be able to find seed and be able to collect seed on this strip, and we have them successfully growing in the greenhouse today. So what are some specific outcomes of the herbarium that relate to Martha's Vineyard? So I've talked about the flora of Dukes County, but this is a botanical survey of the flora of Martha's Vineyard and the Elizabeth Islands. And the most recently revised version was published in 2022. And so this lives online, but is also serving as a living document that's periodically updated to reflect observations and herbarium collections that are made of the county flora. And it's also organized much like the herbarium by family and then alphabetically by species. And so this lives on our website. And then for the Martha's Vineyard Atlas of Life, it doesn't just record plants, but this helps actually inform the flora of Dukes County, so it doesn't actually have to be a voucher to be included. An example of what might not be included is a species of conservation concern, but these are observations that may be made on iNaturalist, and then it will be added to the project Martha's Vineyard Atlas of Life. And so Greg and Margaret actually use this resource along with historical herbaria data to be able to investigate and verify plant identifications. And so you can actually be part of this, as it's a citizen science initiative, and it's available on the iNaturalist. So to summarize what I've gone over today, I've defined what an herbarium is as a collection of pressed and dried plants that are identified, stored, and cataloged for scientific purposes. I've described how a voucher is made and how are they used for scientific purposes, both generally with historical context and as well as by the Arboretum here. And then I've talked about how the herbarium is digitized and how you can use the CNH portal to find occurrence data. And then I explained why are very important and how this relates to the PhD mission. And I also reviewed some island-specific resources that catalog the flora and the fauna of Martha's Vineyard. So thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation on herbaria.